He looked at her and said something no one expected. "I'll give you my car if you can make her smile." She hadn't smiled in years. No therapy worked. No money helped. Her pain was invisible, but very real. What happens next starts with a small, almost meaningless gesture. Yet it slowly changes her life forever. Before the story begins, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from, and if stories about hope, healing, and unexpected kindness touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel and stay with us until the end. This story might surprise you. The restaurant fell silent when Alexander Rhodes made his announcement. Standing in the middle of the elegant dining room, the real estate mogul pulled out his Ferrari keys and held them high for everyone to see. "I'll give this car, worth $500,000, to anyone who can make my daughter smile. A real smile. Not forced. Not fake. Just one genuine smile." The patrons exchanged glances. Everyone in the city knew about Alexander Rhodes and his daughter, Victoria. The tabloids had covered it all. The accident that killed her mother 2 years ago, Victoria's subsequent withdrawal from the world, her blank stare that seemed to look through people rather than at them. Victoria sat at the corner table, 24 years old but looking ancient in her grief. Her face was a beautiful mask. No expression, no emotion, nothing. She stared at her untouched plate as if her father hadn't just made a spectacle of her pain. "Sir, please," the restaurant manager approached nervously. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately." "No." Alexander's voice was steel wrapped in desperation. "I've spent 2 years trying everything. Therapists, medications, retreats, specialists. Nothing. She doesn't speak. She doesn't cry. She doesn't smile. It's like she died with her mother but her body forgot to stop breathing." He looked around the room at the wealthy diners, the business executives, the socialites. $500,000. That's what my daughter's smile is worth to me. That's what I'm offering to anyone who can bring her back to life. The room buzzed with murmurs. Several people approached. A motivational speaker offered his services, a psychiatrist suggested a new treatment, a comedian attempted a few jokes. Victoria didn't react to any of them. She sat motionless, a statue in expensive clothes. In the back of the restaurant, near the kitchen doors, a young man named Miguel had been watching. 26 years old, he worked as a dishwasher. Invisible to people like Alexander Rhodes, someone who cleaned up after their meals and disappeared into the background. Miguel knew about loss. His younger sister had drowned 5 years ago. He knew what grief looked like when it consumed you whole. He saw in Victoria's eyes what he'd seen in his own mirror for years. A person still breathing but no longer living. "I'd like to try," Miguel said quietly. The restaurant went silent again. Alexander turned, looking at Miguel's worn clothes, his calloused hands, his dishwasher's apron. "Who are you?" "Someone who understands," Miguel said simply. "I don't want your car. But I'd like to try." Alexander's expression was a mix of pity and irritation. "Young man, if the best psychiatrists in the country couldn't help her, what makes you think?" "Because they tried to fix her." "I'm not going to try to fix her. I'm just going to sit with her. If that's all right." Something in Miguel's voice, a quiet certainty, a lack of agenda, made Alexander pause. "You have 1 hour. After that you leave her alone. Understood?" Miguel nodded and walked to Victoria's table. He didn't try to make conversation. Didn't attempt jokes or platitudes. He simply sat across from her in respectful silence. Victoria's eyes flickered toward him for a brief moment, the first acknowledgement she'd made of anyone all evening, then returned to staring at nothing. "I'm not going to try to make you smile," Miguel said softly. "I'm not going to tell you things get better or that time heals or any of the things people say when they don't understand. I'm just going to sit here. Because sometimes the hardest part of grief isn't the sadness. It's that everyone expects you to move past it when you're not ready." Victoria's hands resting on the table tightened slightly. Almost imperceptibly. But Miguel noticed. "My sister drowned when she was 15, Miguel continued, his voice low enough that only Victoria could hear. "Maria. She was funny, smart, always singing. One day she was there, the next day she wasn't. And everyone told me to be strong, to move on, to remember the good times. As if grief was something you could schedule and complete." Victoria's eyes moved again, this time staying on Miguel's face. Still no expression but listening. "I spent 2 years like you. Not speaking much. Not feeling much. People thought I was depressed. Maybe I was. But really I was just waiting for permission to feel what I was feeling without everyone trying to fix me. Alexander watched from his table, seeing his daughter's gaze focused on this dishwasher with an intensity she hadn't shown in years. He gestured to the manager to let it continue. "I'm not going to make you talk," Miguel said. "I'm not going to make you smile. I'm just going to tell you that I see you. Not the broken version everyone else sees. I see the person underneath, the one who's still in there waiting until it's safe to come back." Victoria's lips parted slightly as if she wanted to speak. But no words came. "That's okay," Miguel said. "You don't have to say anything. I'll just sit here. Until you want me to leave or until your father kicks me out. Whichever comes first." He settled into his chair, not staring at her expectantly, not waiting for a reaction. Just present. Just there. A quiet companion in the midst of her isolation. Around them, the restaurant had returned to normal conversation, though many kept glancing at the odd pair, the wealthy man's daughter and the poor dishwasher, sitting in silence together. The hour passed. Then another. Miguel didn't push. Didn't perform. Didn't try to earn Alexander's Ferrari. He simply existed beside Victoria's grief without trying to change it. As the restaurant began to close, Alexander approached the table. "It's late. We should go." Miguel stood, nodded to Victoria respectfully. "Thank you for letting me sit with you." As he turned to leave, Victoria's voice, rusty from disuse, whispered, "Tomorrow?" Miguel turned back, surprised. Victoria was looking at him directly now, her eyes still empty but somehow less distant. "Tomorrow," Miguel confirmed. "Same time." Victoria gave the smallest nod. Alexander stared at his daughter in shock. She'd spoken. After 2 years of silence, she'd spoken. "You can keep the car," Miguel said to Alexander as he headed back to the kitchen. "I don't need it. But I'll come back tomorrow. If that's what she wants." Alexander watched Miguel disappear through the kitchen doors, then looked at his daughter. For the first time in 2 years, Victoria was looking at something. Someone, with what might eventually become interest. It wasn't a smile. Not yet. But it was the first crack in the ice. And sometimes that's where healing begins. Not with a dramatic breakthrough, but with the quiet recognition that someone else understands your darkness because they've lived in their own. That night, Alexander Rhodes couldn't sleep. He sat in his study, staring at the family photo on his desk. Himself, his late wife Catherine, and Victoria, taken 3 years ago at her college graduation. Victoria's smile in that photo was radiant, genuine, full of life. He barely recognized that girl anymore. The accident replayed in his mind for the 1,000th time. Catherine and Victoria had been driving home from a mother-daughter spa weekend. A drunk driver ran a red light. Catherine died on impact. Victoria survived with minor physical injuries but major emotional devastation. The worst part, the detail that haunted both of them, was that Victoria had been driving. The rational part of her knew it wasn't her fault. The emotional part blamed herself for every breath she took that her mother couldn't. After the accident, Victoria had retreated into herself. She dropped out of graduate school, stopped seeing friends, moved back home and spent most days in her room staring at nothing. She ate when forced, showered when prompted, existed but didn't live. Alexander had tried everything. The best trauma therapists in Manhattan. A stay at an exclusive treatment facility in Switzerland. Antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, experimental treatments. He'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and countless hours trying to bring his daughter back. Nothing worked. Victoria remained trapped in that moment of impact, unable to move forward, unable to forgive herself, unable to feel anything beyond guilt and grief. The public statement about the Ferrari had been a desperate act born of helplessness. Alexander was a man accustomed to solving problems with money and influence. But grief couldn't be bought off or negotiated with. It just sat there, immovable, destroying his daughter day by day. Now, a dishwasher named Miguel had accomplished what no professional could. He'd made Victoria speak. One word, but after 2 years of silence it felt like a miracle. Alexander pulled out his phone and called his head of security. "I need a background check." Miguel. I didn't get his last name. Young man, mid-20s, works as a dishwasher at La Maison. I need to know everything about him by morning. Meanwhile, across the city in a small apartment in Queens, Miguel lay on his worn couch, staring at the ceiling. His roommate, David, sat on the floor sorting through bills. So you really just sat there with her? For 2 hours? David asked. Yeah. And the rich guy was going to give you a Ferrari if you made her smile? That's what he said. And you didn't even try? Man, that's $500,000. Miguel turned his head to look at his friend. She wasn't a problem to solve, David. She was a person in pain. I wasn't going to perform for a car. You're too good for this world, David muttered. We're 3 months behind on rent, you work 60-hour weeks washing dishes, and you turned down a Ferrari because of principles. It wasn't about principles. It was about seeing her. Really seeing her. Not as a challenge or a project. As someone who's barely surviving and doesn't need another person trying to fix her. David shook his head but smiled slightly. This is why Maria loved you. You see, people. The mention of his sister made Miguel's chest tighten. 5 years and the pain was still there. Duller now, manageable but present. He'd learned to carry it rather than let it carry him. That's what he wanted for Victoria. Not to erase her grief, but to learn to carry it without letting it destroy her. You're really going back tomorrow? David asked. She asked me to. So yeah. What are you going to do? Just sit there again. Maybe. Or maybe we'll talk. Or maybe we won't. Doesn't matter. Whatever she needs. Miguel closed his eyes, thinking about Victoria's vacant stare, the slight tightening of her hands when he'd mentioned his sister, the rusty sound of her voice when she'd asked him to come back. He didn't know if he could help her. He didn't know if anyone could. But he knew what it felt like to be drowning in grief while everyone around you offered life preservers you weren't ready to grab. Sometimes you needed someone to just float beside you in the water, not dragging you to shore, just being there so you weren't drowning alone. The next morning, Alexander's security report arrived. Miguel Santos, age 26. Born in the Bronx to immigrant parents. Father died when he was young. Mother worked 2 jobs to support Miguel and his sister Maria. Miguel had been accepted to college on scholarship but dropped out after Maria's death to support his mother. Worked various jobs. Currently dishwasher at La Maison. Also did handyman work on weekends. No criminal record. No debts beyond normal bills. Volunteered at a grief support group on Thursday evenings. Alexander read the report twice. A grief support group volunteer. That explained the understanding in Miguel's eyes, the lack of fear around Victoria's pain. He made a decision. Instead of having Victoria come to the restaurant, he'd bring Miguel to their home. If this young man could reach his daughter, Alexander would give him whatever support he needed. Though apparently that didn't include a Ferrari. At 5 p.m., a black car pulled up outside Miguel's apartment. The driver handed him a note. Mr. Rhodes requests your presence at his home this evening. Victoria has been asking for you. Please accept this car as transportation. You'll be returned home whenever you wish to leave. Miguel looked at the luxury sedan, then at his own reflection in its polished surface. Worn jeans, faded t-shirt, work boots. He didn't belong in Alexander Rhodes's world. But Victoria had asked for him. So he got in the car. The Rhodes mansion was in a neighborhood Miguel had cleaned houses in but never entered as a guest. The driver led him through an entrance hall that could have fit his entire apartment. Alexander met him in the foyer. Mr. Santos. Thank you for coming. Just Miguel. Miguel then. My daughter. She's been different today. Still not speaking much, but she's been waiting by the window. Looking for your arrival. That's more awareness than she's shown in 2 years. Where is she? The garden. She's been sitting there all afternoon. I'll take you. They walked through the house, past rooms filled with art and expensive furniture, until they reached French doors opening onto an elaborate garden. Victoria sat on a stone bench, staring at a fountain. I'll leave you 2 alone, Alexander said. But Miguel, thank you. Whatever you're doing, whatever this is, thank you. Miguel walked into the garden. Victoria looked up as he approached, and for the first time her eyes focused clearly on another person. You came, she whispered. I said I would. People say a lot of things they don't mean. I know. I'm not most people. Miguel sat beside her on the bench, not too close, giving her space. They sat in silence for several minutes, listening to the fountain, watching late afternoon sun paint the garden gold. Why? Victoria asked finally. Why what? Why do you care? You don't know me. My father offered you a fortune. You could have tried harder. done something dramatic. But you just sat there. Why? Miguel considered his answer carefully. Because grief isn't a performance. It's not something you cure with the right words or the right gesture. Something you live through. And sometimes, the only thing that helps is knowing someone else has lived through it too and survived. Victoria's hands were shaking. I killed her. My mother. I was driving. If I had been paying more attention, if I had reacted faster. It wasn't your fault. Everyone says that. But they weren't there. They didn't see. No. But I know guilt. I know the stories we tell ourselves about what we could have done differently. Miguel's voice was soft but firm. My sister drowned at a community pool. I was supposed to go with her that day. But I had to work. So she went with friends instead. If I had been there, maybe I would have seen her struggling. Maybe I could have saved her. Victoria looked at him, really looked at him. But you couldn't have known. Exactly. Neither could you. That drunk driver made a choice. You were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But grief doesn't care about logic. It just makes us believe we could have changed what was unchangeable. Tears filled Victoria's eyes, the first tears she'd cried since the accident. I don't know how to stop feeling guilty. You don't. Not completely. You just learn to feel other things too. Eventually. When you're ready. The tears fell, silent and steady. Miguel didn't try to stop them or comfort them away. He just sat beside her, a steady presence while she finally released 2 years of frozen grief. In the house, Alexander watched through the window, seeing his daughter cry for the first time since Catherine's funeral. He wanted to rush out, to comfort her, to make it stop. But something told him this was necessary. That Miguel understood something he didn't, that sometimes breaking down was the first step to breaking through. Over the next 2 weeks, Miguel came to the Rhodes mansion every evening after his shift at the restaurant. He and Victoria fell into a rhythm, sitting in the garden, sometimes talking, sometimes silent, always honest. Alexander watched his daughter slowly thaw. She started speaking more, asking Miguel questions about his life, his sister, his mother. She began eating meals without prompting. She even laughed once, a small rusty sound but real, when Miguel told her a story about a disastrous dinner service at the restaurant. But she still hadn't smiled. Not really. Not in the way Alexander remembered. On the 15th evening, Miguel arrived to find Victoria agitated, pacing the garden. What's wrong? He asked. Tomorrow is the anniversary. 2 years since the accident. Since I killed her. Victoria's voice was sharp with panic. I don't know how to survive tomorrow. I barely survived the first anniversary. And now? Then don't survive it alone, Miguel said. Let me help. How? You can't change what happened. You can't make the day less painful. No. But I can be there. So you're not alone in the pain. Victoria stopped pacing, looking at him with desperate eyes. Why do you keep coming back? Why do you care about someone as broken as me? You're not broken. You're grieving. There's a difference. Miguel stepped closer. And I keep coming back because I know what it's like to face those anniversary days alone. Because I remember how heavy the world felt. And because no one should have to carry that weight by themselves. That night, Alexander approached Miguel as he was leaving. Tomorrow is difficult. The anniversary. I usually try to keep her distracted, take her somewhere, keep her busy. But maybe your way is better. I'd like to take her somewhere, Miguel said. If that's okay. Somewhere that helped me. Not to distract her, but to help her remember in a different way. Alexander hesitated. Victoria hadn't left the house for anything but doctor appointments in 2 years. Where? A place I go to remember Maria. It might help Victoria remember your wife without drowning in guilt. I'll have my driver take you both. Actually, I'd like to take her on the subway. If you'll trust me. Sometimes being around normal people living normal lives helps you remember that life continues. That it's okay to keep living even when someone you love can't. Alexander studied Miguel's face, so young, but carrying wisdom that only comes from surviving your own darkness. Hey, I trust you. But Miguel, if anything happens to her, if she gets worse, I'll bring her back. I promise. The next morning, Miguel picked up Victoria at 9 a.m. She looked terrified, standing in the foyer in jeans and a sweater, the most casual clothes Alexander had seen her wear since the accident. We don't have to do this, Miguel said gently. If you're not ready. I need to do something different. I can't spend another anniversary hiding in my room. Victoria's voice shook, but she was trying. They took the subway to Manhattan, Victoria flinching at every loud sound, every crowd, every moment that reminded her that the world kept moving while her mother lay still in a grave. Miguel led her to a small community center in his neighborhood. Inside, a group of about 15 people sat in a circle. A sign on the door read, "Grief Support Group." "This is where I come on Thursdays," Miguel said. "These are people who understand. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. Just listen." They sat in the circle. The facilitator, a kind-faced woman named Rosa, welcomed them. One by one, people shared their stories. A man who'd lost his son to suicide, a woman who'd lost her husband to cancer, a teenager who'd lost her best friend in a car accident. Victoria listened, tears streaming down her face as people spoke about the weight of grief, the guilt of surviving, the struggle to find meaning after loss. These weren't wealthy people with access to expensive therapists. They were ordinary people carrying extraordinary pain. And they were surviving. When the session ended, Rosa approached Victoria. "First time." Victoria nodded, unable to speak. "It gets easier," Rosa said. "Not the grief, that stays. But carrying it gets easier when you realize you're not alone. When you see that other people have survived what feels unsurvivable." After the session, Miguel took Victoria to a small park nearby. They sat on a bench watching children play, dogs run, people live their ordinary lives. "Every year on Maria's anniversary I come here," Miguel said. "I sit on this bench and I remember her. Not the drowning. Not the funeral. But her laugh. Her terrible singing. The way she used to steal my food. The person she was, not just how she died." "I can't separate the two," Victoria whispered. "Every memory of my mother ends with the crash. With her dying. With me surviving. I know. That's how it works at first. But eventually, maybe you can remember her differently. Not perfectly, grief never lets you forget completely. But softer. Less sharp." Victoria was quiet for a long time. Then, "Tell me about Maria. The real her. Not the tragedy but the person." Miguel smiled, sad but genuine. And he talked. About his sister's obsession with terrible pop music. Her dream of becoming a marine biologist. The time she convinced him to dye his hair purple for her birthday. The way she could make anyone laugh, even on their worst days. As he spoke, Victoria watched his face. Saw how remembering hurt him but didn't destroy him. Saw how he could hold both love and loss together without being consumed by either. "My mom loved gardens," Victoria said suddenly. "She could make anything grow. Even in winter, our house was full of plants. After she died, I let them all die. I couldn't water them. Couldn't stand looking at them. But she would have hated that. She would have wanted them to keep living." "Then maybe we could start there," Miguel suggested. "One plant. Just one. Not to replace her or forget her. But to honor how she saw the world, as something to nurture and help grow." Victoria looked at him, and for the first time in 2 years, something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile but close. Softening. A small opening of possibility. "Okay," she said. "One plant." They stopped at a flower shop on the way home. Victoria chose a small rosebush, her mother's favorite. She held it carefully on the subway ride back, protecting it from jostling passengers, treating it like precious cargo. When they arrived at the mansion, Alexander saw his daughter carrying a plant, her face streaked with tears but somehow lighter than before. "Dad," Victoria said, her voice stronger than it had been in 2 years. "I need help planting this. Mom's garden. I think I'm ready to fix it. To make it grow again." Alexander's eyes filled with tears. "Of course. Whatever you need." That evening, the three of them worked in the neglected garden. Alexander, Victoria, and Miguel, planting the rosebush where Catherine's favorite spot had been. They didn't talk much, just worked together in the fading light, bringing life back to a place that had died with Catherine. As the sun set and Miguel prepared to leave, Victoria touched his arm. "Thank you. For today. For not trying to make it better but for helping me survive it differently." "That's what we do for each other," Miguel said. "Survive together until we're ready to live again." Alexander walked Miguel to the door. "The Ferrari. Still yours. You've done what no one else could. You've brought my daughter back to life." "I don't want the car," Miguel said again. "But there is something you could do for me." "Anything." The grief support group I took Victoria to. They're struggling to keep the community center open. $10,000 would save it. If you want to give something, give it to them. Help other people who are surviving what Victoria survived. Alexander pulled out his phone. Consider it done. And Miguel? Thank you. Not just for helping my daughter, but for teaching me that healing doesn't come with a price tag. Sometimes it's just about showing up and being present. As Miguel left, Alexander returned to the garden. Victoria was still there, sitting beside the newly planted rose, her fingers gently touching the soil. He's special, Victoria said without looking up. Miguel. He doesn't try to fix me. He just exists beside my brokenness without being afraid of it. I know, Alexander said, sitting beside his daughter for the first time in months. I'm sorry I kept trying to fix you instead of just being with you. Victoria leaned against her father's shoulder, a gesture she hadn't made since childhood. You didn't know how. Neither did I. But maybe we're learning. They sat together in the growing darkness, two people learning to carry loss without being destroyed by it. The rosebush stood between them, a small symbol of life continuing, of growth possible even in grief's aftermath. Victoria still hadn't smiled. But she was talking, crying, feeling, living if barely. And sometimes that's where healing begins, not with grand gestures or expensive treatments, but with one person brave enough to sit beside your darkness and wait patiently for the dawn. 3 weeks after the anniversary, Victoria had a setback. Miguel arrived at the mansion to find her locked in her room, refusing to come out, refusing to eat, back in the frozen state she'd been in before they met. Alexander was panicking. She was doing so well. What happened? What changed? Miguel sat outside Victoria's bedroom door. Victoria? It's Miguel. I'm not going to make you come out. I'm just going to sit here. Like I did that first night at the restaurant. You're not alone. From inside, a muffled voice. Go away. Hey. But I'm staying right here. On this side of the door. Whenever you're ready. He settled against the wall and waited. Hours passed. Alexander brought him coffee, food, but Miguel didn't leave. Night fell and the mansion grew quiet. Finally, around midnight, the door unlocked. Victoria appeared, eyes swollen from crying, hair disheveled. I saw her today, Victoria whispered. A woman who looked just like my mom. Same hair, same walk, same laugh. And for 1 second I forgot. Thought it was her. Then I remembered, and it was like losing her all over again. Miguel stood, his legs stiff from sitting so long. That happens. Sometimes grief ambushes you when you least expect it. You think you're okay and then something small destroys you all over again. How do you stand it? How do you keep going when the pain comes back just as strong as the beginning? By remembering that setbacks aren't failures. You're not back where you started, Victoria. You've made progress. Today was hard, but you've had good days too. You planted that rose. You went to the support group. You cried, which means you're feeling again. One bad day doesn't erase all of that. Victoria slid down the wall, sitting in the hallway. Miguel sat beside her. What if I can't do this? She whispered. What if I can't ever be normal again? Normal is overrated. And maybe you won't be the person you were before. Maybe you'll be someone different. Someone who carries loss but also carries wisdom about how precious life is. That's not worse. Just different. I'm so tired, Miguel. Tired of hurting. Tired of fighting to feel okay. Tired of disappointing my father by not being the daughter I used to be. You're not disappointing him. He just wants you alive. Not healed, not fixed. Just alive and here. Miguel looked at her. And I want that too. Not because I'm trying to win a car or complete a challenge. But because I've sat beside you enough to know that underneath all this grief is a person worth knowing. And the world needs you in it, even if you can't see that yet. Victoria leaned her head against Miguel's shoulder. A gesture of trust, of exhaustion, of reluctant hope. They sat in the hallway until dawn, not talking, just breathing together, surviving another hard night. In the morning, Alexander found them there, both asleep against the wall. He put blankets over them and let them rest, grateful that his daughter wasn't alone in her darkest moments. When Victoria woke, she looked at Miguel and said, I want to go back to the support group. Next Thursday. Will you come with me? Always. But Victoria, eventually you might need to go without me. To stand on your own. I know. But not yet. Not today. Not today, Miguel agreed. But someday. When you're ready. The pattern continued. Good days mixed with hard days, progress followed by setbacks, hope interrupted by despair. But slowly, gradually, Victoria was learning to live with her grief instead of being buried by it. She started tending her mother's entire garden, bringing it back to life plant by plant. She began attending the support group regularly, eventually sharing her own story, helping others the way Miguel had helped her. She even started taking walks outside alone, something she hadn't done in over 2 years. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. Miguel continued coming to the mansion several times a week, but the desperate urgency had faded. Now they were friends, genuinely enjoying each other's company, not just survivor and savior. One evening as they walked through the restored garden, Victoria stopped at the rosebush they'd planted together. It was blooming now, small pink flowers opening to the evening sun. Miguel, why do you keep coming here? You don't owe me anything. You've already done more than anyone had a right to expect. I come because I want to. Because somewhere along the way you stopped being a challenge or a project. You became a friend. And friends show up for each other. Even friends with too much emotional baggage? Especially those. They understand that everyone's carrying something heavy. That we're all just trying to survive our own stories. Victoria touched one of the roses gently. I think I'm ready to try something. Something that scares me. What's that? Driving. I haven't driven since the accident. Can't even sit in the driver's seat without having a panic attack. But I think I need to try. With you there. Would you do that? Miguel's heart squeezed. He knew how massive this was for her. Of course. Whenever you're ready. Now. Before I lose my nerve. They went to the garage where Catherine's car still sat unused since her death. Victoria stood before it, shaking, tears streaming down her face. I can't. I thought I could, but I can't. Then we don't. Not today. But I need to. I need to stop being afraid. I need to stop letting that day control my entire life. Victoria, healing isn't about forcing yourself past trauma. It's about honoring your pace. Maybe today you just sit in the car. Not driving, just sitting. Next time maybe you turn it on. Baby steps. No one's timing you. Victoria looked at him, then at the car, then back at him. You really do understand, don't you? How hard this is. I do. And I understand that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and trying anyway. So let's try. Just sitting. That's enough for today. They sat in the car together, Victoria in the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel, crying but not running away. They sat for 10 minutes, then 20. Finally, Victoria turned to Miguel. Thank you for not pushing me. For letting me go at my own pace. That's all any of us can do. Survive at our own pace. Heal at our own speed. There's no right way to do this. As they left the garage, Victoria said something that made Miguel stop. I think my mom would have liked you. She always said the best people are the ones who help you be brave without making you feel weak. I wish I could have met her. Me too. But Miguel, you've given me the closest thing to her back that I'll ever have. You've given me myself back. I'm not the same person I was. But for the first time in 2 years, I'm starting to become someone I recognize again. They walked back to the house in comfortable silence, two people who'd found in each other what they most needed. Not fixing, not saving, but understanding. The simple gift of presence in the face of unbearable pain. And in that presence, healing was finally, slowly becoming possible. 6 months after Miguel first sat across from Victoria in the restaurant, her life has slowly found a new rhythm. She is not cured, because grief never truly disappears, but she is functioning again, eating, sleeping, and reconnecting with the world in quiet, meaningful ways. Victoria has begun volunteering at the grief support group, helping others who are at the beginning of their own journeys through loss. There is a deep irony in this. The woman who once couldn't speak for years now helps others find words for their pain. Miguel remains an important part of her life, though their relationship has evolved. They are no longer bound by survival alone but connected by genuine friendship. He introduces her to his mother, Rosa, whose calm, practical kindness reinforces the idea that grief doesn't need to be dramatized to be honored. Meanwhile, Alexander quietly steps back, understanding that healing cannot be bought or rushed. Miguel eventually brings Victoria to meet Vera, a 92-year-old Holocaust survivor and artist. Vera's presence is powerful and unfiltered. She does not pity Victoria or minimize her pain. Instead, she acknowledges it directly, teaching her that grief is neither something to compete over nor something to escape. Vera explains that art saved her life by giving her suffering a place to exist outside her body. Through painting, she transformed memories that could have destroyed her into something she could face without drowning. Encouraged, Victoria paints for the first time. She pours her grief, guilt, and memories onto the canvas. Darkness mixed with small traces of color representing love, memory, and Miguel's quiet support. Though the result is messy and raw, Vera reminds her that honesty is more important than beauty. The experience helps Victoria realize that healing doesn't mean forgetting, but learning how to carry loss in a way that still allows life to continue. On the subway ride home, Victoria reflects on how Miguel has never pushed her to heal on someone else's timeline. For the first time, she recognizes that she no longer needs permission to remain broken. She is ready to live again, not because her pain is gone, but because she understands she can coexist with it. Victoria tells Miguel that their connection is no longer about rescue or survival. It is about friendship. Miguel accepts this with warmth and relief, realizing that presence, not solutions, was what mattered most all along. They part as equals, choosing to remain in each other's lives. As Victoria returns home, she feels gratitude instead of guilt. Gratitude for Miguel, for Vera, for Rosa, for her father, and for her own heart that kept beating even in despair. Standing at the gate of her home, she takes a breath and walks forward, into a future shaped by loss but no longer defined by it. 3 weeks later, a new crisis emerges when Miguel's mother, Rosa, calls him in tears. The community center, home to grief support groups, art therapy, and youth programs, is being shut down after the landlord sells the building. The center, which once saved Miguel and now supports Victoria and many others, has only 30 days to vacate. Miguel desperately tries to find funding, calling donors and organizing fundraisers, but the rising costs make it impossible. They are still $42,000 short. When Victoria learns what's happening, she refuses to let the place close. She reveals that she has a trust fund left by her mother. Money she has avoided using out of guilt. This time she chooses differently. Instead of seeing the money as something tied only to loss, she decides to turn it into something meaningful. Rather than renting a new space, she proposes buying a building outright to give the community center a permanent home, free from future instability. With Alexander's help covering renovations, they find a modest warehouse in Queens. The transformation becomes a collective act of healing. Members of the grief group paint walls, build shelves, donate artwork, and help renovate. The space is imperfect but deeply human, created by people who know loss and still choose to show up for one another. On the eve of the opening, Victoria and Miguel stand together in the finished center, now named the Catherine Rhodes Memorial Community Center. Victoria explains that she no longer feels broken, not healed in the sense of forgetting but alive again. She tells Miguel that his greatest gift wasn't fixing her pain, but sitting beside it until she could carry it herself. Miguel, in turn, realizes that helping Victoria gave his own grief purpose after losing his sister. Victoria then reveals something Miguel never noticed, a photo he took weeks earlier at Vera's art studio. In it, Victoria is smiling, her first genuine smile in over 2 years. Miguel didn't win by trying, he won by being present. By allowing joy to return naturally. Alexander still insists Miguel deserves the Ferrari, but Miguel declines. What he wants instead is for Victoria to continue helping others through the center, turning her pain into purpose. She agrees, and commits herself fully to expanding the programs not out of guilt, but because this is who she wants to be now. As they lock the doors that night, they know what awaits inside. People searching for permission to be broken and hope that survival is possible. And they will find it. Because Victoria and Miguel learned what grief truly teaches. That healing isn't about erasing the cracks, but learning to live beautifully with them. The Ferrari remains unused. But Victoria is using her life again. And that, connection, purpose, and the courage to keep living, is the true reward. 1 year after Miguel first sat across from Victoria in that restaurant, the Catherine Rhodes Memorial Community Center held its anniversary celebration. The space was packed. People whose lives had been touched by the programs, volunteers who kept it running, donors who'd made it possible. Alexander Rhodes stood at the podium looking out at the crowd. "A year ago, I stood in a restaurant and made a desperate offer. I said I'd give my Ferrari to anyone who could make my daughter smile. I thought it would take something dramatic, expensive, miraculous. I was wrong. He gestured to Miguel, who stood near the back of the room, uncomfortable with attention as always. This young man accepted my challenge not for the car, but because he understood something I didn't. That healing isn't something you buy or force or manufacture. It's something you witness. Something you hold space for. Something you wait patiently beside until it's ready to emerge. Victoria stood beside her father now, looking so different from the hollow-eyed ghost she'd been a year ago. Still carrying grief that would never fully leave, but carrying it alongside life, joy, purpose. My daughter still misses her mother every day, Alexander continued, his voice thick with emotion. We both do. That loss doesn't go away. But Victoria has learned to live with it rather than die from it. And she learned that from Miguel, from Rosa, from Vera, from this community. From people who understood that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is simply to stay. After the speeches, after the celebration, after the crowd had thinned, Miguel found Victoria in the art therapy room. She was adding finishing touches to a mural on the wall, a garden in full bloom with hidden images of loss woven throughout. Beautiful and painful at once. Your mom would love this, Miguel said. I think she would. It's how I remember her now, not just the loss but the beauty she brought to the world. The way she helped things grow. Victoria stepped back, examining her work. I'm starting grad school next month. Art therapy program. Figured I should actually learn how to do what I've been doing here. That's great. Really great. And I've been seeing someone. Dating, I mean. Victoria glanced at Miguel. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready for that. But he's kind and patient and he knows about my mom. He doesn't try to fix me or rush me. Just accepts where I am. I'm happy for you. Miguel meant it. This was what he'd hoped for. Not that Victoria would need him forever, but that she'd heal enough to build a full life. I wanted to tell you because you might see less of me. I mean, I'll still volunteer here, but I won't need to come as often. Won't need you as often. Victoria's eyes searched his face. Is that okay? Victoria, that's not just okay. That's the whole point. You don't need me to survive anymore. You've learned to do that yourself. I'll always be grateful. You gave me my life back. You gave yourself your life back. I just sat beside you until you were ready to claim it. They stood in the art room, surrounded by the creative expressions of grief they'd both learned to transform into something meaningful. After a moment, Victoria hugged Miguel, not the desperate clutch of someone drowning, but the warm embrace of genuine friendship. Thank you for everything. For sitting with me. For not giving up. For showing me that survival was possible even when I couldn't see it. Thank you for letting me. For teaching me that my own pain had purpose. That Maria's death wasn't meaningless if it helped me help you. They parted, and as Miguel watched Victoria return to her mural, he saw something that made his heart swell. She was humming. Softly, almost unconsciously. The first music he'd heard from her in all the time they'd known each other. Life was returning to Victoria in small, beautiful ways. Not erasing the loss but growing alongside it. Rosa approached Miguel as he prepared to leave. I'm proud of you, Mijo. You saved that girl. I didn't save her, Mama. I just didn't abandon her. There's a difference. Maybe. But you chose to stay when everyone else gave up. That matters. Miguel drove home in his beat-up Honda. The Ferrari still sat unused in Alexander's garage, a symbol of a transaction that had transformed into something much more valuable than money could measure. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Thank you for everything. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For believing I could survive when I didn't believe it. You're the best friend I've ever had. The truest. The one who stayed. Miguel smiled and texted back. That's what friends do. We stay. And Victoria, I'm proud of you. For fighting. For surviving. For learning to live again. Your mom would be proud too. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, I know. I can finally feel that now. That she'd be proud. That I'm allowed to live even though she can't. That's your gift to me, permission to survive and even thrive without guilt. Miguel set down his phone and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Maria's spirit existed in his memory. Not the drowning, not the funeral, but her laugh, her dreams, her belief that life was precious and meant to be lived fully. He'd honored her memory by helping Victoria survive. And in helping Victoria, he'd helped himself continue surviving too. That's how grief worked when you let it transform into purpose. It connected you to others who were drowning, and in saving them, you saved yourself over and over again. The Ferrari didn't matter. The money didn't matter. What mattered was that a broken girl had learned to live again. That a devastated father had gotten his daughter back. That a community had a space to heal. That grief had been transformed from something that destroyed into something that connected, taught, and eventually helped rebuild. And it had all started with one simple choice: to sit beside someone's pain without trying to fix it. To stay when staying was hard. To believe that healing was possible even when no one else did. Miguel had made Victoria smile. But more importantly, he'd helped her remember how to live. And in the end, that was the real miracle. Not a moment of joy, but a lifetime reclaimed. Not a prize won, but a soul restored. Not a transaction completed, but a friendship forged in darkness that now existed beautifully in the light. The millionaire had laughed when Miguel said he could help. But Miguel had done the unlikely, not through drama or force or wealth, but through the simple revolutionary act of staying present beside another person's unbearable pain until they found the strength to carry it themselves. And that, more than any Ferrari, was worth everything.